Hey, and welcome to the Jessica Paul podcast. I'm your host, Jess Paul, actress, manifestation expert, and mindset coach. And I'm here to share with you all of my secrets on confidence, success, and the magic of manifestation. If you're ready to dive in deep and see more success in your career, more money in your bank account, and more love in your life with a whole new level of freedom, then you're in the right place. I'm letting loose on everything you need to take back control of your life, up-level your mindset, and tap into your manifestation powers. I'm so excited that you're here. Hey you guys, and welcome back to the JP podcast with me. It is your host, Jess Paul, your manifestation mentor and your spiritual bestie, here to help you manifest a life that you freaking love. And we are back, and I am in LA. I am here. I have landed. So much has happened, you guys. I don't even know where to begin with life updates, but I'm loving it over here. And I made a vow to myself, and I think I spoke about this in last week's episode, all about how I was feeling a little bit anxious before I came, but I made a vow to myself that I would say yes to every single invitation that I had whilst out here, every place I was invited to. And literally since arriving, I've had so many invitations, met so many people, and so many things have manifested. And we knew this was going to happen, guys. We knew it would happen. I trusted completely in the process, and it's only been 7 days. So can't announce all the things on here just yet, but I actually have recorded an episode with my good friend Taylor, who I'm staying with, Taylor Carr. She was on the podcast a number of weeks back now, talking about love and relationships, and we recorded an episode that will be coming out next week for you all, with a ton of life updates in there, all the things that have been happening with me. We go in deep, so that is going to be available for you guys next week, so make sure you're all subscribed to the podcast. But for this week, guys, honestly, like, I am just still settling in. Everything is I'm still just kind of like allowing myself to be really in my feminine in these first few weeks out here. I'm actually going to be traveling to Orange County with Taylor as well, because Taylor's making a big move and she is moving over there. And I'm going to be just seeing more of the city. And I also have booked a tour around the whole of California, so that's going to be coming up too. Can't wait to update you guys all about that. I'm going to be literally going around from LA all the way around to Arizona, Grand Canyon, Vegas, other national parks, all the way to San Francisco. So it's going to be so fun. That's happening next month, guys. But I think for today's episode, we should just dive right in, because I've got a really fun episode for you all. This is, again, another guest that came on, and we recorded this episode a number of weeks ago now, but it is such a fun episode. We have the fabulous Brittany Bento on, who is the host of the Not So Normal podcast. She's also a tarot reader, and I found Brittany on TikTok because she's been viral on TikTok a number of times now. We go in on what it means to speak your truth, paranormal activity, alien encounters, communicating with spirits, literally dimension shifts, all of the crazy esoteric chat for you all. It's so fun. Brittany is wonderful. And if you guys have loved today's episode, then please do take a screenshot, tag us both on your Instagram stories. We love to see who's listening in. Brittany would love to see who is listening in as well. And just enjoy it. It is crazy, the things we go into. And these are the sorts of chats that I want to bring onto the podcast. And I have been bringing onto the podcast with my guest experts that have been coming on, because these are the sorts of chats that I literally have with my spiritual besties, and the things that I am researching myself in my own time, like on my own, and the things that I want to share more with you guys, because they're just mind-blowing things, and they might not all be things that you believe in, but it opens up your mind to whole new possibilities. And you guys know that I am I have a big mind. Like, I like to go deep with so many things, and so when it comes to things like aliens and spiritual, very spiritual things, like I just love it. I just love this kind of chat. So if you have loved it, let us know. But without further ado, enjoy this chat, enjoy Brittany, and I'll chat to you all next week. Welcome, Brittany, to the podcast. I am so excited to have you here. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to chatting about, I don't know, whatever it is we're diving into.
So many things. There's so many things that go on in your world. And I actually found you first off through TikTok because you've been viral on TikTok many a time. Um, all with the very spiritual, woo-woo, esoteric stuff that we absolutely love. Um, so I think that a good place to start would just be a bit about you, really. Like, what's going on in Brittany's world? Who are you? What do you do? Your story, really.
Okay, well, I don't even know where to start. I mean, currently, I'll talk about what's going on currently. I do tarot readings full time. Like that's what I do for work. I do like the podcast on the side. Do my TikTok, YouTube, all of that stuff, all based around spirituality because that's my thing. I'm also developing my mediumship and my psychism as well. So I don't offer that
Yeah.
yet because I'm waiting for my confidence to be built up a little bit more. But I really, I guess, stepped into this last year. I've always been into spirituality. Don't get me wrong. Like since I was a child, I used to see spirits as a kid. And it freaked the shit out of me, if I'm being completely honest. And it scared me. And because I didn't have an understanding of what, because I've been, I guess, a medium, whatever you want to call it, my entire life, but I'm only understanding it. I'm coming to understand it more so this year than ever before because I grew up in a very religious, strict household and
Right.
the devil, demons, this or that. So there was a lot of fear surrounding it. So I blocked it out for
Mm.
years, even though I was still so fascinated by it. And I, went to school, did all of the things. I was a teacher for 5 years. I actually quit last year to jump in, like in October last year. So, pretty relatively recently, to jump into readings full time because when I started my TikTok, I didn't expect it to turn into what it did turn into.
Yeah.
I started TikTok during, the pandemic, like a lot of other people. And I started posting just food recipes because I love cooking. That's like another little passion of mine. And then one day I just decided to post a reading and it kind of blew up. And I was like, okay, maybe I should post more of that because where I grow up, like, or at least my environment currently, because I'm also planning on moving too, because you mentioned you're going to LA for three
I
months, which is
am,
really
yeah.
exciting. But in my environment, it's not many people are in this world. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
I have friends, don't get me wrong, but they don't understand. Like, they don't. So I always held back on being public with my readings and stuff just because it wasn't really supported and I always felt like the weird one.
Mm.
So when I did do well, I was like, oh, like maybe there is a community of people out there that are interested in this stuff as well. So I started posting more and my TikTok ended up growing and I started connecting with other people that I, call friends now, even though they live in other parts of the world. I'm like, I need to move now. Like this environment is clear, like where I'm at right now. Nothing wrong with the area, but it's not for me. So I'm
Mm.
excited to move in, within the next few months, and see where the world takes me. But I guess that's like my story in a nutshell. I just started out like everyone else does. TikTok just kind of grew naturally. And now I'm essentially, this is my dream. Like I'm living my
Yeah.
dream and it's crazy. And it's hard to believe sometimes, I shake myself like, because if you would have told me a year ago even, that I would be doing this full time, I would have laughed at you.
Oh
I did
gosh,
not
it's
see it for
huge.
me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's amazing. And, like I've had a number of people on the podcast before that have gone viral on TikTok, and we've spoken about it before because I honestly believe that with TikTok's such an amazing platform, right? Because you can
Mhm.
reach so many people. And like you said, there's like a bunch of people out there that you even never knew existed that are so like you and get this work and get this stuff. Like this is what my podcast is here for. And now you've got a podcast. And it's like, it's such a wonderful platform to connect with people
But I always think, like, if you've gone viral on TikTok, I view it as such a divine spiritual thing anyway. I'm like, you know what? There's a reason that your message had to be shared at the time that you had to share it. And like, you clearly were like holding something back, like not opening up that throat chakra because of, you know, this fear and like, you know, what the judgments might be. And I felt that way for so many years as well with this work. And I was like, oh God, you know, what are people going to think? Jess has changed. Like, Jess is all crazy spiritual. But like, there are so many people out there that get it and so many people that benefit from it. And I think that, again, for you, like, you, because you're sharing so many different things, and especially with the like with the tarot reading and stuff that you're doing now, like, it supports so many people. And I love it. Like, I love all of these things, which is why I'm so excited to jump into this chat with you today, because so you actually have a podcast called the Para Not So Normal podcast. Yeah. And it's like all things paranormal, spiritual, mediumship, aliens, like basically just the most esoteric place that you could find yourself. And this is my jam, like, honest to God, when I'm just like chilling at home on a Friday night mostly, like, I am just down a hole on YouTube researching all of these things, like going in on it, because they're all the things that blow your mind. So I would love for you to just go in a little bit about why you set up that podcast and some of the things you chat about on there, like especially with the paranormal side of things.
Yeah. So did you say why I started the podcast initially?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny, actually. I never planned on starting a podcast. Like, it wasn't something I set out to do. And then through TikTok, a lot of people were commenting on my videos. I love your voice. I would love for you to start a podcast. And I'm like, my voice, like, like listening back to your voice, you hate hearing your voice. That was me. You know what I mean? I'm like, my voice, like, what's so great about my voice? But people kept commenting that. And I'm like, okay, Brittany, own it instead of looking at yourself like hating your own voice. So now I'm starting to love my own voice. It's all a mindset shift. So that's kind of like where it started. And they were saying, I want you to do a podcast. So I'm like, okay, do you know what? I'm gonna look into this. Like, why not look into this? So that's exactly what I did. I looked into it. I bought myself just a simple microphone off Amazon. I have a camera, and that's just kind of how I started. And I was like, okay, obviously my podcast is going to be about this world, because this is what I am obsessed about. Literally, growing up, it's all I ever wanted to talk about. And it's like, why aren't people as interested in this as me? I'm thinking other people are crazy, but I'm like, no, Brittany, you're the crazy one. I'm kidding. I don't think that this world is crazy at all, but that's what I wanted it to be about. And then through TikTok, through wherever I've met really other, cool creators, people, again, with similar mindsets. So, I invite them on, and similar to you, I just kind of like to have a conversation. I don't really have too much planned ahead of time, just wherever it goes, it goes. And I do have a few episodes that are just kind of like by myself talking, depending if there's something that, I want to talk about specifically about, like a spiritual awakening or whatever that may be. But it's just a platform for me to share my voice. And, it's so funny looking back on my life, like when I was in high school, college, university, up until like when I was in my teaching profession, I always felt like my voice was not valid. And I always would have these bigger ideas, because I'm a very, very out of the box thinker. Let's say there was a discussion in class and people are discussing this and that. All I could think is, why is their perception like that? I'm thinking something completely different, but I just thought, oh, Brittany, nobody else is thinking that. Your idea must be silly. So I kept quiet. And only as I stepped into myself, as I stepped into this self-love journey, along with my spiritual awakening, spiritual reawakening, whatever you want to call it, I'm like, no, like, my voice and my perception is valid. And a lot of people need to hear it, because I'm learning that my mind is very different. So this podcast just kind of lets me voice my thoughts, and I'm no longer ashamed to voice my thoughts, as opposed to putting myself down. I'm like, no, like your different perspective can offer value and can open up people's minds. So it's kind of turned into, I don't even know. I mean, I could talk for forever. So it's like it's my way to get all of my thoughts out as well.
Yeah, no, well, I completely relate to that. It's exactly why I started my podcast. And I actually had such a deep download to start it a number of years ago. And I kept putting it off because I kept thinking, oh no, like, what if I put content out there and people judge me for it and then it's up there? And, and I kept out of fear, out of this kind of like, and I was procrastinating. And as soon as I released it, it was like, oh my God, this was everything I was supposed to do. But I love that. And like you said, with your message and the things that you're talking about, on TikTok and on the podcast, I love how much of a mixture it is, because you're talking about this like paranormal, you're talking about ghost stories. And this is what I want to ask you about now, because you've got about these like ghost stories that you talk about communicating with ghosts, but then it's also like the manifestation side of things, and the like the spiritual and talking to spirit, and like I love how nuanced it is. Like I love that because it just shows what is coming out of your mind. Talk to me about the ghost stories. Like talk to me about how that started for you and how you got into this kind of like paranormal activity and like, being around that.
Yeah. Okay. So the ghost stories started back when I was a kid. And so looking back, you know how you have those memories, but you forget those memories and then you remember those memories. So I remember seeing spirits as a kid when I was really, really young, but I was so young that I wasn't even afraid of it. I didn't, you know what I mean, tell mom and dad this or that. Like one of my first recollections that I actually ended up remembering later was, I remember when I would go to bed at night, my parents would like have to stay next to me until I fell asleep, because if they walked out of the room, I'd start crying or something like that. And I remember my dad, he'd like try to like creep out, and then I'd be like, Daddy, mais means like more in Portuguese, and my family's Portuguese, so I'd be like, mais, and he'd be like, oh damn it, like we have to go back. And he would just like rock the bed until like I'd fall asleep. But I remember waking up multiple times, like in the middle of the night or whatever, and I would see these two figures by my bed. And I'm getting chills right now as I'm thinking about them. These two figures by my bed, and I remember seeing them, and they weren't my parents, but I felt comforted as if they were my parents, and I would just fall back to sleep. And I remember that later in life, and I was like, holy shit, like what was I seeing? Like that was not my parents. Fast forward, I was about 9. I was in Montreal, Quebec, where my grandparents live. And my grandma, who she actually recently passed, but she suffered a massive stroke. Okay. Like changed her entire life. She was a different person afterwards. Like she suffered a few strokes, but this one was life changing. She went from being this very, very independent woman to basically a child in an adult body, could not do anything on her own anymore. And during that stay, because my family's from, my parents moved to British Columbia, so we flew to Montreal for the entire summer to help take care of my grandma. And we were staying in my grandma's house. And I remember playing like cash register with my brother and my cousin. We were playing with fake money, whatever. And we were sitting on the stairs, like in the basement. And all of a sudden I felt like chills all down like the back. And it's funny because like chills now, I get chills all the time now. And it's just, me communicating. I mean, everyone I'm sure gets chills sometimes. I'll get them like through my readings and stuff too. And when I'm getting chills, I know what I'm saying is right, because it's spirit just kind of affirming that for me. But I got chills like down my whole back, and I turned around and I saw this black figure. And when I say black, I mean black like a shadow is black. So like slightly transparent in a way, but not 2D. It was like a 3D figure, and no color to it. It was just like black, and it was floating like this high off the ground, and it was a full man, and he was floating away from me. He stopped, turned and looked at me, and then just like disappeared. And that was like the first experience that like I didn't forget. Do you know what I mean? Like that was, and that freaked me out. Like that experience scared the shit out of me. And that was like what that was like maybe what, like my first week in Montreal during that stay. And like I said, we were there for a few months. So I was staying in this house.
Oh my God.
Like seeing something I didn't understand. And I remember like running to my mom and crying and being like I explained everything to her. And at first she was like, oh, it's probably just like the shadow of the lawnmower person, because my grandparents, you know, they couldn't do it on their own. So they hired someone to come cut their lawn like what, at once every 2 weeks or whatever it was. And I was like, no, mom, nobody was here today. The lawnmower person came yesterday. Like, what are you talking about? Like, completely discrediting what I was saying. And I was frustrated because I'm like, I know what I saw, you know? And anyways, I ended up like being really confused. And then like an hour later, my mom comes up to me and she's like, I believe you. She's like, I just didn't want to scare your siblings.
Oh, wow.
Which is why she was trying to like change the subject. But basically my older cousin, when she was 2, she would always or 2, 3, I don't know, a toddler, like she was able to like talk like little words. So whatever the age of that would be, like young, very young, but so young that she doesn't remember this now, if that makes sense. She would always be talking to like nothing in the corner, and she'd always like give masa to black man. And I know it sounds weird to say that, but again, it was black, like a shadow is black, but that's how a young toddler would describe it, right? And masa is a Portuguese bread, so she'd want to share things with this figure. And she was the first one that saw this in that house, and then I was the second one. And I've had like a few experience, like multiple experiences, specifically with that spirit, like afterwards. But that was what really started it for me, essentially, because like I said, that's the one I really remember. And it was scary, and I was scared because I didn't understand it. And, you know, things like footsteps, lights flickering, water turning on and off. I would see it, him or it or whatever the entity was, multiple times.
Wow.
It never harmed anybody, you know, it never harmed anybody, but it definitely was quite powerful because it was able to, like I said, like the vacuum turned on out of nowhere one day, like crazy weird things like that. So
it's interesting because I was going to ask you how you actually felt in those moments, because I guess now, you know, because for example, for me, I've had experiences like that as a kid as well. And I think when you're a child, you're way more susceptible to communicating with spirit. Like I know, and even like my sister's just had a baby, and there's been some moments where I've just watched the baby and like I've been like, this child is looking at something. There is something there, like in this room. And it's fascinating to me. But luckily, I've never had. Well, I have, because as kids, like we have these moments. It's usually when we're going to bed at night where we do see things, and like we can either say to ourselves, "Oh no, it was just a shadow of the trees outside on my window," but like it actually can be that you are seeing spirit, and usually it does freak you out. But for me, one of the most vivid times that this happened to me, it wasn't like a scary feeling. It was actually my granddad that I saw. My grandpa, he passed away far too young, and so he came back, and he actually visited everybody in the house that kind of was a bit more of an open channel. Are you getting goosebumps? Yeah. And like and he came, and this was the memory that, like, you know how you just said that was like your first like ingrained memory of it. This was mine, and he just sat on my windowsill because my bed kind of like was facing like my window, and he just sat on the windowsill and looked at me. And then I remember speaking to my parents afterwards and being like, well, it was like a number of years later because I didn't say anything at the time. And both my mum and dad, and my dad is not into this esoteric stuff at all, but both of them said he came back and visited around that time as well. So but it's really interesting because you had this experience, and it does sound kind of scary. Like for you now, with everything that you do, and because you've opened yourself up to this world, and as you say, you're like really getting into the mediumship and everything. How do you feel about spirit now, and like different entities, as you say? Because do you think that was more of a darker entity, or like do you just feel differently about it now?
Yeah, so I love that you asked that question because my perspective is very different now through mediumship development. And, might I add, I'm no expert. Do you know what I mean? Like, this world is very much so unknown and there's so much to
Yeah.
learn. And there's no way for us to know everything or have the answers to everything because we're not supposed to. We're human. We agreed to forget everything when we incarnated here. So I just want to say that before I jump in. So take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. But through my experience and through development, spirit is pure love and it's nothing to fear. And, there's so much out there that we cannot explain. So with this spirit in particular entity, it's really like curious to me, I'm really curious about it because some of my mentors, they don't believe in negative spirits. They're like, there's no such thing. And I at first was like, struggled with that because I'm like, this experience I've had, or, you watch movies about possessions and, apparently my great uncle was possessed. That's something that I didn't witness this, but this was a story that I've been told. Like my family has like a lot of history with all of that stuff. So, and especially growing up religious, I believed in like demons and all of that stuff. And so I struggled with that. That was a battle. I'm like, okay, well, is it or isn't it? Like, what is real? What is not real? And because when I do this mediumship and I connect with spirits, it's always a beautiful feeling. And spirits are always, it's always love. It's nothing to ever fear. And I see spirits still to this day, like more so on my periphery. It's not as clear as I did when I was a kid, but I do see them in my periphery, like shadows or just figures that go by. And I see glitter quite often as well. Like I'll just be like relaxing and I just see glitter everywhere. And I'm like, oh, this is beautiful. And I just like sit in it. But through, learning and whatnot, what I've come across, and this is kind of what I believe actually, again, take it with a grain of salt. This is my belief, is that so us humans, we are very powerful. Okay. We are more powerful than we realize. And we're always giving off energy. So, for example, you walk into a room and an argument was just had in that room. When you walk in, you feel it. You know how you feel the tension? That's energy, right? We're feeling, I'm getting chills as I'm saying this. We are feeling that energy. So when you put out fear, our energy can actually manifest into energies like beings, entities. You know what I mean? So that's why they say, and I'm getting chills, that's why they say spirits feed off of fear. It's literally your own energy that you're projecting that can manifest into something. And then because of that, your experience can be a scary experience. Do you know what I mean? So it's
100%. Yeah.
So it's like this spirit in my grandparents' house. I don't know. Like, I don't have the answer about that one because the first time I saw it, I didn't even believe in any of this stuff. So it's not even like I was projecting an energy of fear. However, it could have been residual energy from somebody else. When like a lot of bad things happen at a certain place, often those places are quote unquote haunted, like asylums or whatever like that. I'm getting chills. Think of the amount of residual energy that's probably sitting there from other people. Those energies, even though we can't see it, even though it's not visible to the eye, it's still very real. What happens with that energy? Energy is never created nor destroyed, right? It's always there. So if there's like an immense amount of energy in a particular area, it's going to manifest into something, and that's why a lot of houses that are haunted, for example, they'll have like a lot of like teenagers, or like that, this and that. It's the hormones, there's so much energy that even like teenagers project. So I was researching into that and learning about that. And I was like, holy shit, like, and excuse my language, but it's like that could make sense. And that could be more so the negative, quote unquote, negative energies, entities that we experience. I'm not saying that, there for sure isn't any negative energies or entities like other than that, because again, like I don't know everything and it's still very unknown. With that said, through my experience, spirit is pure love. Like I have never experienced anything negative since developing my mediumship. So I hope that answers your question.
Oh no, massively. Like actually something just really dropped in for me as you were speaking because I have the same view where, I don't actually believe that there is anything evil out there, anything like scary, negative, because I've had some clients speak to me about some spiritual experiences and they've been really upset by things. And I've had some experiences that have really frightened me, but I don't actually believe that there's an evil energy out there, I know that it's through manifestation, because obviously as a manifestation mentor, my whole life is through this, and I know that everything that is created is through your power, and it's through what energy that you are cultivating. And something dropped in for me, because I remember when I actually had a really, really horrible nightmare, and it's something that I mentioned like a little bit about on another interview, but we didn't really dig into it. And it was essentially that my nana had come back in a dream, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is my nana coming to communicate with me, and she had not seen her in spirit since she'd passed. And so I was, when in I just remember kind of being consciously aware in the dream, being like, oh my gosh, Nana, like, what do you have to say to me? And she was a big smoker, right? And she was standing on the doorstep. She was smoking a cigarette, and she puts the cigarette out, and she like opens up her arms to hug me, and I go towards her to go and embrace her, and she turns, and her eyes go dark, and she grabs me by the throat. And sorry guys, like listening, like this is quite gross, this is quite horrible to listen to, but like this is what happened. And I remember in the dream like not being able to breathe, and it frightened me to my core. Like, and I woke up, and I honestly I didn't feel right for weeks after that. And I had a very similar kind of dream. It was more of a paranormal dream. Like I would call it more paranormal, where it's kind of like really like what you would view as like a proper ghost type thing, that scary ghost type thing. And it's really interesting, because what you were saying there about how it's the energy that you've kind of that you're holding on to, which could have been residual. It could have been something maybe that you're not feeling now, but like it's come up, right? It's come up to the surface. And what's interesting is that these dreams happened right as I was opening up another side of my spiritual gifts and some of my psychic gifts. And so I'd done a lot of energy clearing. And obviously when you clear energy, it all comes up to the surface. And so it was really interesting, because and it's only just shifted my perspective with what you just said, because maybe that's the reason why those dreams came about just then. You're getting so many goosebumps. I love this so much.
My whole body, yeah.
And but so it's a really great way that you've put that, because I think like I said, I've had some clients as well that have spoken to me before about this, and they've been like, I've had these horrible dreams. And now it makes a lot more sense, because these clients are working with me, and they're opening up these sides of themselves. They're releasing so much energy. It's like that energy has to go somewhere, Yeah.
And the subconscious mind, right, is always working on our behalf, especially at nighttime. So it's like, even though logically our conscious mind can't make sense of it, our subconscious mind could be clearing, like you're saying. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Keep going. But
it's just such a great way of you putting it. Like I said, something just dropped in for me, which is great. I want to know, because the reason I found you was through TikTok, and you had a number of viral videos, and it was with you using, is it dowsing sticks that you call them? Basically the metal rods.
The dowsing rods.
Yeah, the dowsing rods. And so basically, guys listening, like if you haven't seen these, it's like two metal rods that you hold on to, and they're kind of like L-shaped, pointing outwards, and they basically move with energy. And I'm going to ask you to explain it further, because you're the queen of this. You know how this works. But you communicate to someone called Vuvu, and is that your granddad, did you say, or is this?
Yes, yeah, it's Vuvu or Avo. I call him Vuvu. It's grandpa in Portuguese.
Portuguese.
Yeah.
And I went down a hole on your videos, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. This is mental. Like, what even is this? And since like I have seen other people using them, and like I've done a bit of research into them myself, but I would love for you to go in on what the dowsing sticks actually are, how we use them, and like how you've been communicating with spirit with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of, the dowsing rods were something that was a part of this journey for me. It opened, one of the things that opened me up more. After all my experiences, like I said, I was super into all the paranormal world. So I'd be on YouTube. This is before my own development, right? Because I was always fascinated by this stuff. It's like I was always drawn to it, even though I was afraid. I was always pulled back. And I would be watching these like videos on YouTube, the paranormal, investigators, all of that stuff. And they have all this equipment, and I'm like, I can't afford this equipment, but I want this equipment. And then in a few videos I noticed these sticks, and I'm like, what the hell are these things? So I'm like, because that looks like something I could afford, So I looked it up, and dowsing rods, and essentially they're a divination tool. However, for those of you listening, they're actually used as a tool as well. Like people use them to find like water lines under the ground, because they just they're used as a tool as well. Okay, so they can be used for not only spiritual things. However, if you are using them to find water lines underground, it's the same kind of a thing. It's like, it's spirit, like, anyways, it's interesting. They call them witching sticks as well, or that's what they used to be called. I mean, you could like make your own out of like hangers and stuff too, but it's a divination tool. So similar to a pendulum. I'm sure that the audience is more familiar with what a pendulum would be. So essentially it's the same thing. It's a means of communication. You hold the pendulum, it moves a certain way for yes, it moves a certain way for no. Same with the dowsing rods. You could, I say cross for yes, open for no, but sometimes depending on who you're speaking to, maybe they open for no, cross for yes. Or I just said that twice, but open for yes, cross for no. That's what, like I said that the same way, but backwards. Anyways, so yeah, that's kind of how I started it. And when I first got the dowsing rods, I was afraid. I was so afraid. I was like, oh my gosh, is there ghosts around me? Like, and I barely used them because I was afraid. And then eventually, like, I got more comfortable. It's kind of something that got me more comfortable with communicating with spirit. So it was it was big for me. And I was also very big into using the pendulum as well. But yeah, those videos definitely blew up because people were asking questions, and then I would answer a lot of the questions. But I still use them personally, not as much as I used to. Like now that I'm like developing my mediumship, like my connection is so much more different. It's more like intimate in a way. Like I feel spirit blend with me, as opposed to it being like an exterior thing for me to communicate, if that makes sense. It's just, growth and evolving, but I don't really, I keep saying I'll do another video on TikTok with the dowsing rods, but the reason like I haven't really is because some of the questions people ask are just not questions that should be asked. And people get mad at me for not answering their questions. And I'm like, guys, this is, and people, and people were taking like the answers as though they were the Bible. They're like, I trust Vuvu with my entire life. And I'm like, everyone should be taking these answers as, with a grain of salt, especially because some of the questions I ask are quite complex. And it's like, you can't just answer that with a yes or a no. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm like, I don't really like where this is going. And sure, I could have just asked all the questions and, grew even bigger than what I wanted to, because there was those videos were doing really, really well, but that's not really what I'm about. And I just felt not really as much so in alignment with it anymore. And then also like seeing other people using dowsing rods and like charging people for like questions, like ask a question and like charging for it, and I'll get the answer. I'm like, I don't like that, that's why you know what I mean? That's why I like card readings, because spirit is never going to tell you exactly what you should or shouldn't do. That's not how it works. And you shouldn't be asking questions about your future, about, this or that. Like I liked asking questions, like how it started was asking questions about just like the paranormal world. Like, is there life after death? Yes. Like, you know what I mean? Like more so questions like that. And then people started asking, like I said, like futuristic questions. They wanted to dive into like conspiracies, like do John Bonet, like what actually happened? I'm like, okay, this is not what I'm trying to do. So that's kind of why I've like pulled away from it online. But I still I love my dowsing rods, don't get me wrong. And I still would encourage people to, if you're interested in it, get your own pair, but just don't ask questions about, and that's another thing. People would email me, I got dowsing rods, and I asked questions about the future, and what ended up happening was different than what the dowsing rods were saying. And I'm like, yeah, that's because you're not supposed to ask about the future. You have free will. The future is forever changing depending on your actions and this and that. So it's just kind of like one of those things. But
and I really hear that, and I really respect that as well, because I've done similar things in the past where I've gone viral before, and it started to not go in a direction that I want it to go in. Because as well, we've got to remember that like in a world where there is so much fear. And so like we were saying before about how, you know, things can manifest from that fear, I feel that when you're on a platform like TikTok, you know, you're pushing out there to everybody, and that means that there's people out there that are all encompassed with fear. And so that's where those kind of like, when you feel that energy, basically, like I can always feel it when I'm getting that energy thrown at me, and I'm like, I don't want to, number one, be in that energy because I respect myself too much, and number two, I don't want to create this energy. Do you know what I mean? So like I really respect that. And but I think it's really interesting with the dowsing rods, because a sort of like with a pendulum, because I've done work with pendulum before. I tend not to anymore, really. Like it's funny, I kind of had a stage last year, like there was a few months last year where I really got into it, and then I started to, I think it's the same way with what we were saying before about manifesting negative entities. It's like you really are in control. And so if you're sitting there swinging a pendulum or on these rods and you're going, okay, tell me what my future is, you know, tell me, am I going to get this job or aren't I going to get this job? And it's like, if you in your inner being are feeling so fearful around that thing and so negative around that thing, that energy is just going to come out through the rods. It's just going to come out through the pendulum, you know, like it's sitting there, that energy. And so you're not going to hear the things that you want to hear. What you really need to do is just kind of like let it go for a second, clear your energy, clear your like you said, your subconscious beliefs out, and then go back to it. And you know, like basically just in remembrance that we are always in control, and that these things are just tools, and that like we're not going to have our future told through them. So I do really respect you doing that. And you know what you're doing. You know, there's also a lot of people out there that don't, and need to do more learning and need to do more exploration first. And so but with everything else that you kind of talk about in your world then, so you know, like on your podcast, because I was listening to a few episodes, and like there's just so many different things that you chat about. You also chat about aliens and alien encounters. Is there anything you can tell us about that? Because I'm not gonna lie, girl, like this is another thing that I go down a hole on in YouTube, on YouTube, and like you know, I've got so much that I can say about this that I actually haven't shared on the podcast. But what are your views on that? And like, yeah, talk to us about aliens.
Okay, so yeah, I've had so a girlfriend of mine who I actually met through TikTok, she came on and she talked about her like actual alien encounters. So personally, like, okay, my view on aliens do I believe in other beings? 100%, like absolutely. However, the way I think that aliens are different than what we think they are. Space, for example, like I don't know if space is what space actually is. Like there's a lot I question. Like I said, my perspective is very different. You know, do we live in a firmament? That's something that crosses my mind. Like maybe we do, you know, because it makes sense if if you get into that theory. That's a whole other thing. Do your research on it. Okay, like that's a whole other thing. But so for me, it's like I think that like we're at the center of the universe. Everything is here. There's a lot that we cannot see. And I think with extraterrestrials, aliens, like I think that they're, you know, like different dimensions, this or that. Like I think, I don't know, like I don't really know how to explain it, but I've had personal experiences with extraterrestrials on psychedelics. I don't know if that is something that your, you know, audience, you know, wants to hear.
Like absolutely everything. This chat is supposed to be as esoteric and like out there as possible. So
okay,
you know,
let's dive into it then. So, you know, and you know, just a disclaimer, I'm not necessarily like condoning psychedelics for everybody, because this is definitely something that if you're going to do psychedelics, like you need to be in the right mindset. You need to be ready for it. It's not something that you just do. So if you're not there, do not do it.
No. And I will actually say as well, for you guys listening, like it's not something I would recommend either, unless you really understand it. And you also, if you're wanting to do it on more of a spiritual level, like find a shaman to do it with you, or find a group that understands it on a spiritual level. Don't just go out into a field and do it on your own. You know, like it's not, I would never recommend that. So, you know, that's just to put that out there now.
Yeah, that's our little disclaimer. And I agree 100% with what you just said, because exactly that. So let's just dive into my experience since that's out of the way. So I've done, you know, a handful of, I guess, heavier doses of psychedelics, and I've had some crazy experiences, really cool experiences. And, you know, I'm a medium, and when I'm on psychedelics, I'm a walking, like I am in two worlds at one time. Like when it's the weirdest thing, like when I tell you I'm here, but I'm also like in another world, like I am in two worlds at the same time. It's crazy. And I've been astral projecting. I've been to other places, like my consciousness has projected, and I've had these encounters with these beings. And I'm like getting emotional thinking about it. But these beings are, every experience I've had has been with these beings has been positive. Don't get me wrong. Like I've had an experience on psychedelics that was definitely scary. However, there's always a lesson to it, which is something I want to say as well. Like even if you have a quote unquote bad trip, is what they say, there's always a lesson with it. And psychedelics opens your mind up to that. However, with these beings, it's always been just so much love. And there's a lot that I forget. It's, you know, like on psychedelics, I remember this one experience. I was astral projecting. I was with this being. I don't know what this being was. All I know was this being was so much greater than me. So much greater than me, because I remember like I felt like I was just so lucky to be in their presence. Do you know what I mean? Like I felt like I was a little nothing. And this being, whatever species, whatever alien, whatever it was, whatever extraterrestrial it was so much more knowing than me. And all I remember is, we're going to show you this, but you have to agree. You have to know that you're not going to remember. And they wouldn't show me it if I didn't like accept that. So I was like, okay, fine. Like I'll forget. And I forgot, of course. And I'm like, damn it. Like, what did they show me? Like, I don't remember. But then I've had these other, you know, like I've channeled things too. It's like, I know this is an extraterrestrial. And like, I remember like writing down a message, like I have it like on my notes. It was like a purple aliens is how I signed it. So I'm like, I don't know why I feel like they're purple aliens, but basically they were telling me, you know, like nothing is real. We need to remember that. Like this is very much, let me see if I could pull it up for you. I'll read them.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty simple. Like it's nothing.
So was this through a meditation, or did this just come to you?
I was on psychedelics at the time, and it just, yeah, this is on an experience, on a trip, I guess you could say. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Okay, it's right here. Okay, so it's titled "Nothing is Real, Alien Message." This is November 17th. Okay, so it's not that long ago. Earth is just a learning experience. Earth is just a learning experience. And then I wrote, I am tapping into something else right now. And then they said, I'm with you. And then they were like telling me like what I need to do. So I wrote down, I just need to write to receive. And when I see this tomorrow or later, it'll all make sense. Earth is just a playground for learning. Everyone needs to know that. We need to relax a little. We need to not let the stress of the day-to-day get to us. I am tapped in. So I was talking about myself, and they want to use me and my platform for good. You're from, and then it's weird because it's like it goes from them talking to me talking. So that's why it's a little confusing. But then you're from an alien planet, and the message above is what I will read later and understand. So I was saying like they're from an alien planet, not me. That is all I need to know. That is it for now. Purple aliens. So it's like super basic. It's super, do you know what? This actually happened in the summer. I must have edited it in November, because I'm like, this wasn't November. What am I talking about? But basically after this, because this was in the summer, this was before I quit teaching. It was this experience that essentially pushed me to quit teaching. Wow. You know, it opened my mind, and I realized that we can do whatever the hell we want. Like we are capable of anything, any reality we envision for ourselves. We absolutely can make that a reality. We just don't believe it because we get so stuck in the day-to-day, and we feel like what's important is important when really it's I don't know, it's not.
It's not. When you this
it's
is the
not.
reason that I love going down a hole in this stuff. Like, this is the reason that I'm on YouTube all the time researching these things, because it does put, I mean, some people might say, Jess, you just overthink things too much, but for me it puts things into perspective. I'm just like, like, if I'm watching or if I'm listening to, let's say, Dolores Cannon, I love Dolores Cannon's work, and she obviously talks a lot about alien life and everything within her research here through hypnosis and hypnotherapy with people. If anybody hasn't heard of Dolores Cannon, go and just research her on YouTube, because it's fascinating stuff, and she's got loads of books as well. But it for me, if I'm down at a YouTube hole on these things, it takes me out of the everyday overthinking of my own life, these silly little things that we stress ourselves over. And it reminds us that we're actually like a tiny speck in this goddamn universe of however many universes there are, you know what I mean? So it's like, for me, it's a really important part of the work that I do as well, and just life in general, to ground me. But really interesting then about these alien experiences, because I as well have had a few. I don't know how much like I'm ready to actually open up about it on the podcast yet myself, but like it's always a certain species that I see. So it's interesting that you said purple aliens, but for me they're always blue, and they kind of look a little bit like, like the Avatar, like they kind of look a little bit like that, but really beautiful, like kind of like goddessy, like, and again, I get the kind of same feeling that they're really like above me, like that, like kind of like I'm like, whoa, like in awe of them. So like I've had those experiences before, and I've not really I guess I haven't like gone in too much depth with it, but it's happened to me a couple of times before. I would love, though, for you to just explain to us what astral projection actually is, because this is another thing that I was going down a hole on, and like how you started doing it. Like, how did you get to the point where was it through the psychedelics that you started astral projecting, and like what actually is astral projection?
Yeah. So there's astral projection, and then there's like another word as well. I'm trying to remember, because there's like two different things.
Okay.
And I forget the other name right now. I'm blanking on it. Astral projection, astral travel. Okay. I could be wrong, so don't quote me, but this is my understanding of the two. So I've done astral projecting. I've never actually astral traveled. So the difference is, astral traveling is when you're actually able to take your astral body, like roll it outside of your human body in a way. And it very much so like feel like, and like I said, I've never astral traveled, but it's like astral traveling. You can, it's okay. Let me back up a little bit. Let me try to explain it this way, because I'm not explaining this very well.
To explain, yeah.
Yeah. So astral projection is when you take your consciousness, and you project your consciousness elsewhere. That's what I've done. So projecting my consciousness out there, because again, energy knows no space or time. You can take your consciousness and you could bring it elsewhere. So I was still very much so aware of my physical body. Do you know what I mean? Like, if somebody were to have been like, Brittany, get up, like I would have been able to get up, even though I would have been mad, because I would have been like, no, I'm traveling right now. Like, don't bother me. But so I projected my consciousness to these other universes, places, dimensions. I don't know. I don't even know where I was, but I was somewhere else. I was not where I was. And my body was essentially sleeping. Even though like I wasn't fully asleep. Do you know what I mean? I was just in a very, you can't be fully asleep, but you have to be very relaxed, like and that's why psychedelics help, because it helps allow you get to that place of relaxation that you need to be in to do that. You don't need to be on psychedelics to do this, but that's why it's difficult for some people to astral project, is because you need to, it's like a very, very deep state of like meditation.
It reminds me, of hypnosis, when you get to that really deep state, or like a very deep meditative state, because actually, as you're talking, like I feel this has probably happened to me before without really realizing it, but through very deep meditative state and hypnosis too. But yeah, go on. What's your experience of it?
No, and it's like my eyes will be closed, for example, because my body is sleeping, but my consciousness is elsewhere. And I'm looking as if I'm, like I'm looking on this earth right now. I'm seeing everything in color. You see everything in color, like, but you can fly, you can just go from here to there. Like it's very, it's interesting. Like my consciousness truly is elsewhere. Astral travel is similar, but it's a little different. It's not just your consciousness. It's like your whole astral body that you take out. And I've never been successful in astral traveling unless like they are the same thing. Like I don't even know, but I've heard that they are different. And I think that that's what the difference is, again, based on my understanding. So I've successfully projected my consciousness. Astral traveling is something I haven't been able to do, but essentially they're very similar because it's taking a part of you and putting it elsewhere while your physical body is, here.
And it's kind of like, this is really when people talk about dreams, and my God, I could go down a hole on some of the dreams I've had, but like when people wake up from a dream and you're like, that was so fucking weird. Like I just let's say somebody from your primary school that you haven't seen for about 20 years was in your dream, and like I've heard that is because you're actually astral traveling or astral projecting in your sleep, and your consciousness is friends. Like your consciousness and that girl from primary school's consciousness are actually like friends in a different reality, in a different timeline, and like that's why they randomly can come in person in a dream, and you're actually like going off experiencing all sorts of things across the world with loads of different people in different realities without realizing it in this reality, which is why sometimes random people can either pop into your head or pop into your dreams. And I find that fascinating.
Interesting. Yeah, dreams are something else that's very, very fascinating, very interesting, because I think like a part of it is the subconscious mind, but then another part of it is you are elsewhere in your dreamland. You know what I mean? Like you do experience these things with other realities, this and that. And I honestly don't remember. Like I know I dream, but I don't remember most of my dreams. Like most of them I don't remember.
This is like a whole other conversation, isn't it? I just looked at the time. I'm just like, oh my gosh, we've been talking for so long. And like, I honestly could have these chats with you for like the whole day. Like it fascinates me. And like I said, because you have so many different avenues to what you chat about and what you go into. But I would love for you to let people know where exactly they can find you. Because we've had such a great chat today. I honestly feel like we could do a part 2 on all of this. Like we could just talk for hours and hours. But where can people find you? How can they work with you? Anything else that you want to wrap up with before we wrap this episode up?
No, absolutely. And yeah, I could talk about this all day too. So I feel that. So you can find me on TikTok, YouTube. I mean, I have a podcast as well. My TikTok is just my name, Brittany Bento. YouTube as well, Brittany Bento. My Instagram, Brittany Bento with a number 3 at the end, because my name was already taken when I made the account. So I had to add my favorite number. I know I had to add my favorite number at the end. But if you go to my website, it's brittany-bento-readings.ca. And I mean, my name is spelled Brittany, but I could even just send you the website link.
Yeah, no, massively.
And all of my like social medias, links to everything where you can find me is on my website. So just go to my website. You can find everything there, and you could book a reading with me too, if that's something you're interested in. I offer private 20-minute one-on-one tarot readings. I could do any type of reading regarding tarot that you're looking for, like love, career, general guidance, what's coming in for you, just anything really. So yeah, if that's something you're interested in, I've done lots of readings actually from people. You're based out of, is it the UK?
I'm in the UK. Yeah.
The UK. Yeah. I've done a few readings for people from the UK. So even though the time difference is crazy, as long as you calculate the time zones, it can happen. I've done it. I've done people from around the world. So it's really, really cool. But yeah. And if there's anything I want to leave you guys with is just, don't be afraid to authentically be you, like if you're interested in this stuff, dive into it, learn about it. And that goes for anything. Like, don't let anybody hold you back. If you feel called to something, regardless of what it is, dive into it. Even if you feel like you're a beginner, it doesn't matter. You're called to it for a reason. Because I held off for so long out of fear. And if that's one thing I could say to people is don't let fear stop you. Don't let judgment from others stop you, and just because you were somebody at one point, it doesn't mean you can't evolve and grow and change as a person. So don't hold yourself in a certain area of life because you feel like you need to present yourself a certain way just because maybe that's how you presented yourself for a long time. Like, it's okay to grow. And if people don't want to support or grow with you, they don't have to. You'll meet other people that you are in alignment with. So yeah.
Oh, what a wonderful way to wrap this up. I love that because, like we were saying just at the start of this, there are whole communities of people out there that get this. And even the people that are my like OG listeners that have followed my podcast since the very beginning, they watch me grow and shift on the podcast. And either like you can come with me on the journey, or you can choose not to. It's entirely down to you. But there are so many people out there that are fascinated by this work, and it is just curiosity at the end of the day. Like you said, you're not claiming to be an expert in anything. How can we cannot comprehend half of the magic like that goes on in this universe. So if you're curious, and I will be putting down all of Brittany's links in the show notes, so you can go and follow her on Instagram. Go and make sure that you take a screenshot of this episode and tag us both on your Instagram stories, because we love to see who's listening in.
I do.
Yeah.
Me too. I was going to say, love that.
Yeah. Tag Brittany, tag myself. And I also may be appearing on Brittany's podcast very soon as well in the near future. So we'll be chatting again about all this stuff. But thank you so much, Brittany. Thank you for spending your time with me today, and I hope you're going to have a wonderful rest of your day in Canada. And thank you everybody for listening, and I'll chat to you very soon.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for listening. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend who you think would love it too. And if you want to let me know how you found it, just screenshot this episode, add it to your Instagram story, and tag me at I am Jessica Paul, so that I can throw all the love right back at you. And of course, subscribe, hit those 5 stars, and leave a review to show your support and to keep the good stuff coming. Sending you so much love and gratitude from your girl Jess.